You are as a first eyewitnesser there. Can you tell us about that humanitarian crisis there in Gaza?
Now one of the biggest problems is that the wounded are so malnourished because of the famine that their bodies don't heal after surgery.
If ceasefire happened today, ceasefire won't be ever enough now for Gaza because we need a payback for all what happened.
We can see, and we should be in no doubt, that Western countries are giving Israel all the time it needs to finish the genocide and to wipe out the Palestinians. The price is very high, but the price in history is always high. The price that the Algerians paid was high. The price that the Vietnamese paid was high. People pay a high price to defeat colonialism. I'm no doubt that in the long term, our people will be victorious.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new episode of Digital Intifada. We have the honor of speaking with Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah, a highly respected reconstructive surgeon who has dedicated his career in serving and providing medical care in areas of extreme violence, particularly in Gaza. He is also director of Glasgow University. Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. We have been following your incredible work in Gaza and continuously updating the world media about the situation there in Gaza. And also, again, we are very, very happy and glad to, receive you here. And, before we dive into the situation in Gaza, we would like to know, can you tell us a little bit about your career journey and what inspired you to specialize in, reconstructive surgery, and how did you end up providing medical care in such intense environments?
I think within modern Palestinian history, there's always been, especially after 1948, a tradition where health and the provision of health is seen as part of the resistance to the Zionist project, part of the resistance, part of the national liberation movement. And therefore, I came from that tradition, which started in the 50s and, voluntary clinics in the refugee camps, and then the Palestine Red Crescent Society, which was part of the PLO in Lebanon, and then the war in Lebanon and the doctors of the war in Lebanon, Beirut siege in 1982, and then during the First Intifada, the medical organizations that came out of the First Intifada. And so when I was growing up, that was part of the culture that I was exposed to, that found that the provision of healthcare to our people was an intrinsic part of the struggle. And so even during medical school, I would volunteer to go back to Gaza during the First Intifada. And then as my career progressed, I developed an interest in war injuries. And when I became a surgeon, I started working not just in Palestine during the wars in Gaza, but also in Iraq and in Syria and South Lebanon and in Yemen.
Inshallah. So, we've been following, as I've said, your amazing work in Gaza particularly. We would like to know some of the challenges, experiences that you have faced there as a medical doctor, and what are these experiences? Of course, have shaped your perspective on the genocide taking place. Can you tell us about these experiences?
So what made this genocidal war different is not just the scale of the destruction. To give you a kind of quick example, there were 2,500 beds in the whole of the health system in Gaza before the war. By the end of the second week, there were 6,500 wounded. And so the magnitude was overwhelming. The siege meant that things were bad when the war started, because you had 16 years of blockade on Gaza. And then the total siege after the 8th of October meant that we were starting to run out of much needed supplies, medication during the war. And then the targeting of the health system as an important strategy within this war. The bombing of Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital, the bombing of the hospitals, the targeting of doctors and nurses, the destruction of the health system made it more and more difficult to try to provide any kind of meaningful care to the wounded.
So how has the ongoing genocide, of course, as you have said, most of the hospitals with this ongoing genocide, I'm not sure which hospital is working now, but the health care infrastructure in Gaza is, as we can see from the media, it's destroyed in Gaza. What is from your perspective, what's the most needed help or hand to that healthcare system needed now?
As you said, the Israelis have now effectively destroyed the health system. And they retarget any hospital that tries to undergo any kind of repairs to start providing a service. So we saw that in the Indonesian hospital in Jabalia. After part of it had been repaired by the Ministry of Health, the Israelis then went in again and set fire to it. And we saw that in Shifa Hospital when they completely destroyed it. What Gaza now needs is a ceasefire. We need to stop so that we can rebuild the health system. Unfortunately, big parts of the health system are so destroyed that they need to be rebuilt from scratch. We need an interim period of field hospitals until the hospitals like Shifa, which were 30% of the capacity of the system, are completely rebuilt from scratch. And some hospitals that are partially damaged, like Al-Auda and Jabalia, like Ahli Hospital, to be repaired and have their capacity increased.
These situations that you're mentioned and we are still witnessing, that genocide in Gaza turned into such a severe humanitarian crisis. From you are as a first eyewitnesser there, can you tell us about that humanitarian crisis there in Gaza?
To give you just a kind of small anecdote, a friend of mine who was one of the last surgeons to leave Gaza before the attack on Rafah was telling me that now one of the biggest problems is that the wounded are so malnourished because of the famine that their bodies don't heal after surgery. And so when they operate on them, the wounds open up again because they are so malnourished that their bodies are incapable of closing the wounds. And so what we have now is that triad of famine, of infection because of the destruction of the water and sewage, because of the rubbish that's been collecting for over 8 months, and injury. And when the three meet, they're causing death on a scale that's beyond what we see, because people with small injuries are dying because they are unable to heal and they get infected. People are dying from the famine, and people are dying from infectious diseases.
So where is the international humanitarian and medical community from this? How did they respond in Gaza?
The problem is the Israelis still control access to Gaza, and so whoever goes in and goes out is under the control of the Israelis. We can see, and we should be in no doubt, that Western countries are giving Israel all the time it needs to finish the genocide and to wipe out the Palestinians. We saw that a few days ago when the British government successfully got the International Criminal Court to suspend the arrest warrants on Netanyahu. We see that in the United States, which has started delivering a half-ton and one-ton bombs again. We see that everywhere. And so the humanitarian community is trying to work around complicit Western governments and an Israeli government that wants the genocide to continue. And we see how Israel ensures that the famine is not interrupted, that they target aid workers, they target the trucks carrying any food trying to get in, especially to northern Gaza.
This is turns me to ask about the advocacy and raising awarenesses work for Gaza, and to tell the whole world about the genocide happening in Gaza. To which extent do you think that this advocacy and raising awarenesses can continue? You said we need a ceasefire. I mean, if ceasefire happened today, from my personal view, ceasefire won't be ever enough now for Gaza, because we need a payback for all what happened. We need a human rights, if there is a human rights now to speak about what's happening. So do you think that this advocacies and raising awarenesses still will intervene in those ceasefires and to recover what happened?
I certainly think that there has been a major shift in public opinion. We have elections in the United Kingdom coming up in a few days' time, and Gaza is part of the debate in the internal elections in the United Kingdom, and similarly in the United States. The problem is the complete control over the political establishment to prevent any meaningful change. I think the advocacy needs to continue after a ceasefire, because the Israelis will try to use the siege again to destroy the lives of Palestinians and to continue the genocide. So you're right in identifying the need that advocacy needs to go beyond just calling for a ceasefire. And there needs to be justice. 16,000 children killed cannot go unpunished. 22,000 orphaned. All of these crimes have, for humanity to be able to move back to a rights-based and a law-based international order, these crimes cannot go unpunished. Because if they do go unpunished, it means that a crime is only a crime if the victim is the right color and the right ethnicity and the right race.
Definitely. Despite of this dire circumstances, as you have been there in Gaza, can you tell us about some examples of resilience and hope that you witnessed among those people in Gaza? Because we are seeing the TVs and just before this program, I was witnessing a girl. She is interviewed by one of the channels or whatever, but she was talking that I lost all my families, and she's just 15 or 14, 20 days ago, and my all families, my mother, my father, and my two brothers have been under the bombed houses because she left to buy something from the shop. We can see something, another soul that maybe we were very curious to know how those people are being patient and being this level of believers, and I want to hear from you if you have examples or anecdotes about that.
So the reason why the genocide was defeated is because Israel expected that after the beginning of the war, Palestinians would leave Palestine. Now there's around 700 to 800,000 still in the northern part of Gaza. A few days ago, when they attacked Shaja'iyya neighborhood, there were 70,000 people still living in Shaja'iyya, despite all of the bombing on Shaja'iyya, despite all of the repeated attacks on Shaja'iyya. Palestinian steadfastness and Palestinian decision never to become refugees again is what has defeated the attempt at ethnically cleansing Palestine again. And that steadfastness is made up of stories of individuals who move from one house to the other. It's made up of stories of doctors still working in the north. You know, despite all of the attacks, friends of mine still operate on whatever parts of whatever hospital is left, and they do surgeries, and then the Israelis attack these hospitals, and then they come back and they fix them so that they can provide that surgery. And so there's a resistance to this world of death that the Israelis have created through hanging on to life in small and in large acts of defiance.
Yeah. It's a very maybe classical, and I'm shy to ask this question, and while the genocide is still going on, but what do you think about the future of Gaza, the hopes in Gaza, and how you can, as a medical doctor, as an activist, as a person who was called a hero that, you know, served in Gaza, do you see that hope in Gaza, and what will be your, you know, message to the international audience and their solidarity?
I've no doubt that in the long term our people will be victorious.
Sure.
I have no doubt that the Zionist movement will never recover from this genocide. At the end of the day, where do the Zionists go after genocide? They've tried everything, including the final solution. And once the final solution is defeated, that project will implode on itself. The price is very high, but the price in history is always high. The price that the Algerians paid was high. The price that the Vietnamese paid was high. People pay a high price to defeat colonialism. And therefore, although we are now witnessing untold horrors, the world has run out of terms to describe what's happening in Gaza. In the long term, the Zionist project will eventually fail because it has failed to drive the Palestinians out of their country.
Yeah, I mean, I second you on that. The Israeli story to the whole world for years and years now, it's changed. I mean, nobody in the East or the West, the general world are knowing now who is the real criminal happening in Gaza, and also taking this time to ask you also about how can the organizations, maybe individually, we can raise the awarenesses, we boycott, we, you know, be on the streets and continue speaking about Palestine and Gaza on the ground or on social media or wherever positions that we have. You are a best example that anyone in his or her own position can do something for Gaza. But the organizations, what will be your advice for advocacy and humanitarian and you know, the general organizations? They want to do something for Gaza, but they are stuck with kind of raising the awarenesses, being people on the streets, boycotting, but what else, what further that you advise the organizations?
I think if we, my advice to individuals and organizations, if you think of the big picture, it's overwhelming. And it fills you with a sense of paralysis. But you need to think of your own capacity. What can I do? And which field? And the destruction of everything in Gaza means that all of us can do something. If we're in education, we can do something to help the universities. If we're in health, we can do something. If we're in construction, we can do something. If we are in commerce, we can ensure that Israeli companies are boycotted and companies that have dealings with Israel are, if we're in academic institutions, we can make sure that Israeli academics and Israeli universities are boycotted. And to continue the awareness. What we are now worried about is what's called fatigue. You know, people are now normalizing this genocide because they've been watching it for 8 months. They've tried to stop it. They haven't been able to stop it. And there's a kind of sense of hopelessness that can creep in, which is exactly what the Israelis want, for everybody to feel hopeless and then turn their back because they can't stop it. And so it's critical for all of us continue doing what we're doing. This is a system that has been built over 76 years to protect Israel. And that system needs to be dismantled one piece at a time, whether it's in academic institutions, in the media, in the economy, in commerce, in industry. Everywhere there is a system that was created that needs to be dismantled so that Israel loses its impunity, that cannot feel that it can wipe out the whole nation and have no consequences.
Definitely. I mean, speaking about the story of Israel have been now rubbish for anyone who uses phone, maybe from any part of the world. It's all changed, and that's a big maybe transferring in the Palestinian issue, especially when the Sheikh Cerrah incidents happened. We were doing some social sciences, research, and we found out there are, especially when you mentioned about academicians and education, the Israelis uses education and writing academically in a huge, scopes and websites mentioning about Israelis as the naive side, as the people who are getting, out of their houses from different part of the world, and they need a place to stay. And I was, even in some Muslim countries, when we did some live sessions on social media, we were shocked that a lot of people weren't aware of even some simple traditional food, or maybe about Palestine, and they consider it as an Israeli food, or and so on. But today, I think any child, any person who is not aware of anything about the world, just seeing some social media, posts, will know who is right, who is wrong. And in that, I want also to ask you, since you were very active also mentioning the world media about the updates happening in Gaza, do you think that social media will continue being effective to change the mind of people all around the world?
I think those who own social media, like Meta, like Elon Musk, will try to introduce algorithms to limit the way the access people have to these images. But at the same time, there is a limit to what they can do while still having a functioning social media platform. And it is our job to fill the social media with these images, to fill them with these stories, to distribute them. Because we know, and we've seen from the student movement in the States and in Europe, is that there's a whole generation under the age of 25, 30 that only gets its news from social media. And that's why it's been much more politically aware than previous generations, because they're not under the propaganda of the BBC or CNN or NBC or any of the traditional pro-Israeli media outlets. That they get their news from Palestinian journalists, they get their news from each other. And it's critical that that content is continuously being produced so people can take an active role in what they see.
Yeah. Thank you very much, for sharing your invaluable insights and your experiences in Gaza and your advices as well. Thank you for so much for your time and dedication. And I hope I mean, one session won't be enough to speak
Thank
about Gaza. We will continue speaking, we will continue boycotting, we will continue raising the awarenesses about what happened in Gaza until the ceasefire and after ceasefire, inshallah. And also a special thanks to our viewers for tuning in to Digital Intifada. Stay tuned and informed. Until next time.